What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today, we'll be chatting with Keith Pompey of Locked On Sixers as James Harden makes his debut for the Philadelphia 76ers, a couple of games under his belt. Just how dominant have James Harden and Joel Embiid looked sharing the floor together, and what is the ceiling for this 76ers team? But first, a quick message from our friends over at BetOnline, because look, football might be over for the season, right? But basketball's in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to wind up landing, BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all of your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And hey, it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your source for hockey, boxing, UFC odds, right to the Olympic coverage and information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action available to you. BetOnline, where the game starts. James Harden making his Philadelphia 76ers debut, and here to break it down with us is none other than Keith Pompey, host of Locked On Sixers. Keith, couple games under his belt already. James Harden and his new teammates with the Philadelphia 76ers, the new dynamic duo in the NBA between Harden and Joel Embiid. I mean, Harden's the first player ever to drop 25 and 10 in the first two games with a new team. He is the first Sixer in history with a 25, 10, 15, and 5 stat line. Tied Ben Simmons's career high, made threes as a Sixer in one game. I mean, the storylines kind of write themselves. What is your immediate takeaway from these first couple games with James Harden in Philadelphia?
I mean, the immediate takeaway is just how surprising his play is, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but it's like one of those things. You heard all the stories about him. You know, you're hearing that he's not a good teammate. You know, you're hearing that he's a ball hog, even though he's averaging 10.3 assists. But when you look at it, you see a completely different guy. And I know that people are going to say it's over time you will get a better idea. But right now he just makes the Sixers so much better. I mean, Joel Embiid gets everything freely. Guys who can't get to the basket are getting lobs. I mean, James Harden just seems like the X factor, and he's defying all the things the critics said that he wouldn't be able to do.
Yeah, you actually had the chance to kind of highlight that question, asking James Harden about his play previously in Houston, kind of the heavy, the super heavy isolation style of play. Now, I covered James Harden myself here in Houston, and I can tell anybody who wants to ask, is James Harden a selfish player? Far from that. He plays the style of game that elevates himself and his teammates. He averages the double-digit assists. He's constantly looking to set his teammates up, and now he has this dynamic pick and roll partner in Joel Embiid, something that he's never had before in his career. He's had, a talented big man before in Dwight Howard, who is a rim running big. Then he had Clint Capella, obviously, who he helped secure the bag there because he makes any rim running big that plays alongside him look like an all-star caliber talent, but he's never had a talent to the level of Joel Embiid. How does that pairing look right now in these first couple games, Keith?
Unstoppable. I mean, if you want to be seriously, I know that's what Joel said, but he's right. That's how it looks, is unstoppable. Because I mean, you look at it, Harden's doing whatever he wants. I mean, he's just getting double doubles, triple doubles, and Joel Embiid is averaging like 35 points in these two games, and it's happening easy. So I mean that's a dominant pairing because right now there's a lot of teams in the past, they would try to run an extra man at James. Well, if you do that, you're going to have a one-on-one situation with Joel, which is an easy dunk, right? Now, if you try to double and triple team Joel, then James is going to make you pay. And then also they spread the ball around too. So they literally look unstoppable right now.
What's your take on how those two have meshed to this point? I know it's still pretty early on, but what's the impression that you've gotten from them as teammates so far, and how they've kind of been able to mesh and coalesce, not just on the basketball court, but also off the court in practices, what they've said about each other, that kind of thing?
Yeah, right now is all the, oh man, I love him, he's a great guy type of thing, right? But I kind of believe it. Sometimes you hear it and you're like, come on, man. Like sometimes Ben and Joel would talk that way, and you're like, nah, that's not what I'm hearing, y'all. Things like that. Well, here's the thing about Ben and James. not Ben, Joel and James. They have a lot of similar friends. Like, Meek Mill, the rapper, and James Harden are really good friends. Michael Rubin, one of the co-owners of the Sixers, and James Harden are really good friends. Daryl Morey, we know that relationship. Well, these are all three guys who Joel really get along with too and have friendships with. So it's kind of like they've always been in the same circles. So I kind of think that, it's one of those things where, yes, they do get along well on the court, but they like the same people. They've been around each other before off the court. So it's kind of like a friend coming into the, you have a buddy, and now all of a sudden that buddy gets traded to your team and you're elated because you always wanted to play with that guy. That's how the pairing is to me right now.
Kind of comes back to what James Harden said initially after the trade was consummated and all that, that Philadelphia was always priority number one, and things just didn't unfortunately work out that way for him to get to Philadelphia. So Brooklyn Nets happened. Obviously, that story has now ended. Now he's in Philadelphia with Joel Embiid. But Keith, there's another guy here that we've got to talk about here for a minute, and it's Tyrese Maxey. I don't want to forget about Maxey because he has had a sensational season. He's been absolutely phenomenal, and life is about to get so much easier for him, to where I know everybody's looking at this as like a dynamic duo, a 1-2 punch between James Harden, Joel Embiid. But I kind of think that Tyrese Maxey, we might have to look at this as a potential big three out in the East now for the Sixers. That might be a little presumptuous, a little early to make that claim, but life is about to become very, very easy for Tyrese Maxey, and he's the kind of guy that can flourish with Joel and James Harden facilitating so many easy looks for him.
I agree 100%. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, and I feel bad that I don't. But when you compare what they're doing through their first two games, talking about the big three, comparable to when Harden was in Brooklyn last year with Kyrie and Durant, in the first two games, all three of those guys played. The Sixers statistically are way better. It's crazy. It's not even like it's crazy. So when you think of things like that, it kind of lets you know how good Maxey can be. Now, the one thing about it is, Maxey was always a combo guard who had to play point guard because of Ben Simmons. Well, when you have Harden now, he can go back to becoming that combo guard. And then when Harden goes on the floor, he slides over to the one, right? So right then and there, that's really helping him, because this guy is, first of all, no one's really paying attention to him. He's getting a lot of easy looks, but at the same time, he's playing a position that he's more comfortable with as well.
Now, Keith, it could all just be sunshine and roses. I've got the Sixers pegged as like the team to beat in the Eastern Conference this season. Again, I made that prediction the moment the trade happened. I looked at just this team on paper, but in your eyes, what is the biggest weakness for this Sixers team? The thing that could potentially ultimately be their downfall?
Right now, I think perimeter defense is a struggle. I think that you have a guy like Matisse Thybulle, who's a solid defender. But outside of that, I think that some of these guys are going to get tested when they go up against, Miami, Boston, teams like that with elite perimeter players. Also right now, they're trying to find a backup big for Embiid. They picked up Willie Cauley-Stein on the 10-day, but right now, realistically, Paul Millsap at 6'7" is their backup center. So you just have to see, like, because in the playoffs, Embiid's going to play more minutes, but they lost their insurance policy and Andre Drummond. So to me, that's those two things: perimeter defense and a backup big, a quality backup big that they can depend on, are two of their biggest weaknesses.
Are you hearing anything about any names that could be coming up on the buyout market that the Sixers may be looking to potentially pick up and bring into the fold? I know we've got the cutoff date here very soon for teams to be able to waive players and make them available for the playoffs for teams that are going to be going that route this season.
I think with Cauley-Stein, they want to see how that works out. They really do. But it's one of those things where it's kind of like a tryout. And there's other guys that you thought would have worked well with him, Tristan Thompson, but he went and he signed with another team. So what's the Lopez one? The Lopez brother that plays for
Robin Lopez.
Yeah, Robin. he would be a great fit, but it just seems like no one's buying him out. He's not getting bought out just yet. But aside from that, I think that, Cauley Stein may be their best fit. Like some people were talking about Ennis Freedom, but my problem with him is on the defensive end. I don't know. He struggles a lot and he really doesn't have a good, he's a good energy guy, but I don't know if he'll be a perfect fit for what the Sixers are trying to do. So I think Cauley Stein is getting an extended look, and then maybe it could be some people from overseas coming back over.
Are the Sixers the team to beat this year in the Eastern Conference? Are they potentially the team to beat in the NBA? You're going to have us covered for all of that and more over at Locked On Sixers. Keith, thank you for stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
Hey, man, thanks for having me.